Welcome to the Garden State Baseball Podcast. Everything you need to know about amateur baseball in New Jersey. Here are your hosts, Steve DeTrolio and TJ Hunt.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Garden State Baseball Podcast. Today we have head coach Rob Vaughn from the University of Maryland. Alongside me, as always, is TJ Hunt from PBR New Jersey. What's up, Rob?
Nothing, man. Excited to be here. Excited to talk a little baseball, talk a little leadership, whatever we got tonight. I'm excited, man.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, pumped to have you. Thanks for coming on, Rob. Excited to see another coach trying to pass the time by on another podcast.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what we do. That's exactly – I feel like Zoom, we should have bought stock in this well before this whole pandemic hit, because I didn't even know what Zoom was until about 5 weeks ago, and I feel like about 70% of my life is spent on this thing right now. So getting used to it, and it is what it is right now, so we're making the best of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you and everybody else, right? This is how we communicate. It's like the new norm.
Yeah.
No question. The fact that we're playing cards over this, there's all sorts of stuff going on. You're communicating with friends 5 minutes down the road over this. It's a little new normal, but hey, it's what it is. We'll hit it and keep going.
That's right.
Good deal. Well, we definitely wanted to touch upon a topic that I don't think gets discussed that much, via the internet, via Twitter, and that's leadership and culture. And I know that's one of your passion projects. I believe one of the main things, obviously, about being a good leader is decision making, and obviously making good decisions, making tough decisions. And you've recently been promoted to head coach. You were an assistant coach first, and I think as assistant coach, you go from maybe making suggestions, and now obviously as a head coach, you go from making decisions. So how did you find that transition?
Man, it's a great question. I think every coach that gets into this, you sit here and, I think when you're just finishing up your playing career and decide this is the route you want to go, most of us get in our foot in the door kind of with the volunteer route, which is what I did. I was a volunteer at Kansas State for 2 years. And, when you're a volunteer, it's like you can't wait for that next step. You can't wait for the opportunity to get on the road and recruit, to be, a full-time assistant and this and that. And then as soon as you get to be a full-time assistant, I mean, it's the nature of the beast right now. It's like, I can't wait to be a head coach. I can't wait to be a head coach. And, fortunately for me, my wagon was tied to a pretty special dude in John Sheff. He's a very dear friend of mine. He gave me an opportunity when I was 25 years old with zero recruiting experience to come be an ACC recruiting coordinator, which I don't know what he was doing, but fortunately we had some success. And when he left, an opportunity kind of fell in my lap. I was 29 years old. I was very, very, very far from ready for that job. But I think that's a little bit what life is. It's about stepping out of your comfort zone, kind of pushing the edges a little bit of, maybe I'm not ready for this, but I want to take that leap. I want to take that bound. And now I want to go in reverse sometimes. Like there's times where I'm dealing with stuff where I'm like, hey, no, let me go be the assistant again. All I want to do is coach hitters. I don't want to mess with this. Let me recruit, coach hitters, and be done. But it's just the nature of the beast. It's the amount that I've learned in 3 years is incredible. I'm very, very blessed and fortunate to be where I'm at. I love the University of Maryland. I love the administration. I love everything that we've got going on here. I love my coaches. So it's just been a huge thing. Like you said, you go from the guy, making some decisions on what recruit comes in and what recruit comes out to now you're the guy writing the lineup. Now you're the guy that, I think for really good leaders, I think when success happens, you pass it off to somebody else. Like when guys are successful, it's all the players. And when things go bad, it falls on your shoulders. That's what great leaders do, and they don't deflect stuff. And it's stuff that I've learned. It's been 3 years of not what we have envisioned. I mean, you come in, every guy's convinced the second you get in this seat, we're just going to roll this thing up. We're going to do it better than everybody else, and we're going to be awesome. And it's tough, man. There's ups and downs, and I think the ups and downs are what make the journey a lot of fun, though. So learned a lot over the last 3 years. I'm still learning a lot every day. Like I said, I'm very fortunate to have some mentors and some men that I lean on, both for baseball stuff and just life stuff that you deal with when you kind of get in this seat. So definitely having those mentors, having some people to look up to there is obviously something that I think expedites your learning curve a little bit.
Yeah.
I heard a really interesting story, and of course, if you don't want to share this, we can edit it out. I'm sure there's a way to. When Coach Sheff left to go to Virginia Tech, and you were interviewing for the job, can you confirm that you took a huge binder of stuff as to why you should be the head coach of the University of Maryland into the AD's office, and you went page by page with the AD?
Well, I certainly did. You know, it was one of those things. I think when you're an assistant, you just want to be ready for your opportunity. Well, shoot, we tell players all the time, right? You never know when your opportunity's coming. You have no idea when it's coming. And but when it does, you have a small window and you better be ready. And so I think as an assistant coach, that's something we just kind of were doing along the way. Like, you're formulating a resume, like you're starting to learn. Like, I think the best coaches aren't always the ones that just reinvent the wheel every time, but it's the ones that are around men that are a lot smarter than them and that do stuff well. And then you figure out what of that meshes with what you really believe, and how do you put that together into what you think. And I've always been a very organized person, I guess, when it came to that. So even when I'm 25, I'm keeping practice plans that Coach Sheff would just post on a Tuesday in September, just so that I had something like this. Okay, these are what they look like. And, you know, you're just going through there collecting information. And I think, you know, I'm a little bit of a dreamer with things. I'm a little bit of a looking to vision and visionary type stuff. And I just think I felt like Maryland was a place that if somebody would commit to being here for the long term, you could blow the doors off this thing. Because I felt like it was a very untapped thing. It's an unbelievable education. You were just in a spot that has a ton of people. I was coming from Manhattan, Kansas, where there's like 7 people, and now we're right outside of Washington, D.C. So there's just a difference in population densities, and I felt like it could be a good place. So your whole time you're kind of going through this, and I mean, shoot, by the end, it was probably about a 50-page document, and you know, our sports supervisor called me and he's like, hey, this isn't an interview. He just kind of wants to talk to you. And I was like, forget that. Like, this might be my one shot. So I go in, I got my suit on, roll in there, and I'm not thinking, I mean, I'm thinking it's like a massive Hail Mary. And I was nervous as all get out. I'm on the couch the night before. My wife's looking at me. She's like, you look terrible. I was like, I feel horrible. Like, I'm not ready for this. Can I do this? Is this going to work? And then I just went out there, and I think, like any of this, when you start talking about something that you truly believe in, and it's not fake, it's real, you believe in it, you're passionate about it, that just kind of flows out of you. And, you know, I spent probably an hour and a half or so with him, and went back down to my office, not really knowing how it went, you know, like feeling like I felt like for me, I got everything out I wanted to. And then at that point, it was out of my hands. And I got a call about 4 minutes later saying, hey, why don't you come back up to the office? And I was like, well, this is either really, really good or this is really, really bad, one of the two. And walked back up and was like, hey, we got to go through some stuff, but we want you to be here. We want you to stay here and ride this thing out. And that's a moment I'll never forget. I'm extremely indebted to Kevin Anderson. He was our AD at the time, and believing in a 29-year-old that had never been a head coach. And at the time was the youngest head coach in Division I baseball. And so the fact that he trusted me with his program to lead this forward was obviously something I'm grateful for, something I appreciate. And yeah, it was a crazy story, man. Like, you never know when it's coming, but we were ready, and it ended up working out well for us.
Yeah, the first time I heard that, I think Corey was telling me about it, and I was like, man, that's some serious, like, go get it, like, passion. That's great, man.
Yeah. I think it's what you got to do.
Yeah, no doubt. You got to stay ready, like you said. And you touched on, like, being passionate about coaching and leadership. And, you know, I look at your staff, you know, with Corey Mascara and, you know, Papio and Swope, you know, young guys that just get after it. They have so much energy and enthusiasm. And you know, it starts at the top, you know, with the coaches, the leadership, you know, that's the culture that we're talking about.
No doubt. And that's what I wanted. When I started putting this together, obviously I knew, you know, I knew Swope, I'd be able to convince him to stay. You know, I had talked to Pap a little bit when this stuff started going down. You know, Pap was a redshirt freshman when I got here. And I'll never forget, he hates when I tell this story, but he was my wife's favorite player. Like, my wife loved Pap because he was like the guy that was just the hardest worker, like the grinder, had ability, but man, just worked his tail off, was a competitor. He's the all-time winningest player in Maryland baseball history by the time his career finished. But he hit his first home run. We're in our 800 square foot apartment. We just moved here. My wife doesn't know anybody, so she's sitting at home watching it on the game tracker. She's not even watching a live feed. It's like the little dots running around. Yeah. And Pap hit his first home run. And I come home and she's like crying, telling me how excited she was for me. And I was like, babe, you're ridiculous. But you talk about passion. Like, my wife's as into it as we are. And I knew kind of what fit our personality. I knew I think that's one of the biggest things. I think you have to be true to who you are. It doesn't mean you don't you ignore the things you're not great at. But to me, the greatest strength of our staff is the energy, the innovation, kind of the excitement that we bring to the yard every day, and the work ethic that comes along with that. And so I knew I wanted that. And so really knowing that I kind of had Pap and Swope already kind of in my back pocket for that, it all just turned to who I could bring in as a pitching coach. And I've recruited against Corey, or alongside him, I should say, for a long time. Didn't really run into each other on too terribly many players, but shoot, we spent hours and hours and hours at Diamond Nation at 1:00 in the morning finishing games. And shoot, you guys have had Corey on here. If you can get him going, you can really pass some time. But it was really clear to me, like, that's who I wanted. I didn't even have a list, which is probably the most, for a guy that's big on organization and making sure everything's in order, not having a list of pitching coaches is probably a problem. I was fortunate that the one guy we really wanted that I thought was a great fit, we were able to land. And that's just, we try to be who we are. We try to embrace what we're good at. And I think passion and energy is something that we definitely don't lack on our staff. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No doubt.
Yeah, they say the youth is wasted on the young, but I don't think that's the case for University of Maryland. I think you guys are doing an awesome job there.
Well, I appreciate it.
Obviously, there was a lot of uncertainty, maybe some nerves, like you mentioned, getting the job. But once you got the job and you're kind of in that seat, was there a moment that you kind of, after you got through it a little bit, you decided, like, yes, this is the moment I know, like, I'm good, I'm comfortable now, I'm ready to rock. Was there any moment that you could remember?
I will honestly say it probably took me a good year. It probably took me I spent the first year, the one thing that I think kind of helped prepare me for it is the one thing that Coach Sheff did for me, and at the time Coach Bellinger, then Coach Fecto, is one of his big beliefs is hire good people and let them work. That was his thing. Like, I'm not going to micromanage everything. I'm hire good people and let them do their job. And so the beauty is, like, Coach Sheff wrote the lineup every game day. He's the boss. If he wanted to sack bunt, we were sack bunting. If he wanted to do some of that, we were doing that. But he gave me a lot of autonomy with the hitters. So I was almost like a head coach of the hitters. So with that, like, there's a lot that goes into kind of my philosophy with offense and what we do. But I got to really start learning, what do I believe in offensively? What values do I believe in? What kind of skills do I believe in? How do we want to coach? So I was able to think through a lot of that, which allowed me, when you become the head coach, to just take that and kind of spread that on a broader scale, which was great. But I'll tell you, the first year, just being very real, I'd coached the hitters at Maryland for 5 years. And when I got the head job, it was a little bit, should I do what Sheff did? Like, Sheff was kind of I'm going to sit back and run team defense, run the infield, do some of that. And I'm going to let, Rob do all the hitting. So I kind of pulled back. It's like, okay, I'm going to let Swoper do it. I'm going to try to figure out where I fit. And I felt like the whole first year in coaching, I was a little bit of a lost puppy, not knowing where I was needed much. Like, I spent my whole career as a hitting coach talking trash on pitchers and literally telling all the pitchers that I didn't like them. And then now I'm coaching them. So you're like, I got to hang out with these guys a little bit so they know I don't hate them anymore. But I think that whole first year, I really spent a lot of time just really trying to figure out what my niche was. What was I going to be? Was I going to be John Sheff? Was I going to be a guy like Matt Deggs, who's way more involved? Was I going to be a guy like Andy Sawyers, who's one of my mentors, who's very involved? And I kind of just didn't know where I fit. And so it really took about a good year. After that first year, we go through the summer. I think year 2, I was able to settle in and actually feel like I was prepared to attack the thing. Year 1, it's like your hair's on fire the whole time, and you don't really know what you don't know until you're sitting in that seat, and you're starting to deal with the scholarship stuff, and you're starting to deal with parents that you never had to deal with before, and you're starting to deal with just the things that head coaches do, head coaching meetings. You're starting to deal with all the planning that goes into stuff that you just don't know about. So I would say really it was more after that first year, when we hit that summer of starting year 2, is when I felt like I was able to kind of slow things down a little bit and actually get back to the heart of, here's who I want to be as a head coach. Here's what I want it to look like. What do we as a staff care about? And how can we kind of cut all the fluff and just authentically coach these guys the way we want to? And we had obviously took a little bit of a step that last year. And then we're off to a pretty good start this year. So it really took me probably about a good year before I felt like prepared, ready, or like confident, like, I got this. Here's where we're going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like Steve and I or we're both in education. And it's almost like you being the teacher, right? You're trying to be the teacher that's relatable. And then, you go to grad school, you get the master's degree, and now they want you to be a principal. So now you're a principal and you're kind of feeling your way out, man. How do I go about, teaching these teachers, or how do I go about, teaching these coaches or teaching the kids on my team? If I'm more of a head coach, should I focus more on the hitters? Do I have to give the pitchers more focus? So it's that balance, man. It's everything that you were just talking about. And, it definitely has that little bit of that grace period where you're figuring yourself out.
No doubt. And I think that's even when you're hiring people, that's something I think you have to hire people that believe what you believe, because that's the number one thing. But number two, I don't think you can have the same personalities. Like, the one thing you look at on our staff, there's a lot of energy on our staff. There's a lot of passion on our staff. But you put me, Pope, me, Swope, Pap, and Moose next to each other, and we all kind of have some different ways that shows. And I think that's important. Like, if you have a staff full of guys that are going to scream and yell at somebody every time, you're going to have a team that hates playing for you, that's playing scared, that's doing things wrong. If you have a staff where everybody's like, hey, it's okay, Johnny, like, you're going to be okay, you're probably going to have a team that's soft, that you don't like coaching. So I think it's like kind of the yin and the yang. You need to figure out, when you're putting a staff together, it's not just about hiring friends. It's not just hiring people you like. It's about where maybe you a little deficient, like taking a look at yourself in the mirror, like, what do I need help with? What am I not great with? Now let's kind of surround myself with people that are great at that's their thing. And I think when you do that, you can put a unit together that can really tackle a lot of different things. So I think, just as much as is all that stuff is real, I think when you're hiring people, like, shoot, you guys read books and stuff, like, get the right people on the bus. Like, that's important, and so that's what we try to do. And then from there, you just figure out how the pieces fit, how you want to make this thing look. And I think we finally got this thing moving in the direction that we want it to go.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest, when you're looking at leadership, not hiring yes men, but hiring, someone that's going to complement, someone may challenge a little bit. So you kind of create that economy of, you're going to eventually get down to the answer, what you should do, not what someone's going to tell you they think what you want to hear. I think that's obviously all important when you're building a staff, and that's obviously goes to leadership qualities, and making sure that you don't want someone in your ear just giving you, this is what I think he wants to hear, so this is what I'm going to tell him. Sometimes it's good to have that little bit of debate back and forth. You kind of learn that way.
You have to. I think you have to have healthy confrontation. There's obviously a way to go about it, but you don't need guys in your office. If you need somebody to agree with everything you do, then I would venture to say you're probably not as confident in what you're doing, because you're scared. It's like the bully that just screams and yells so that nobody messes with them. Like, the reality is, I think you have to be comfortable. We say comfortable being uncomfortable, gets used way too much, but comfortable with confrontation, which by nature, I'm not the most comfortable dude with one-on-one confrontation. You can ask my former players. You get me in a group of them, I'll get after them pretty good. But one-on-one confrontation, especially with a peer, with a fellow coach, is not something that I'm just like, man, I love that. Sometimes I tell Moose, like, I think he enjoys confrontation too much. But for me, that doesn't come supernatural. But I think, I was listening to a thing the other day. It was a podcast talking about Nick Saban. And we all look at him as like this coach of all coaches, this leader of men, this guy that just models consistency. And he's like a super introverted dude that was a terrible public speaker. But he knew, if I'm going to be in this position of leadership, if I want to accomplish some of the things I want to accomplish, I've got to become a better communicator, because you can't lead people well if you don't communicate well. And so I think that's the big thing for me. Having healthy confrontation is important. And if you're scared of that and you can't kind of get over the hump with that, I think you're kind of capping yourself off as a leader of people. And so, I think that's one of the first things I tell our guys, that when we're doing a staff meeting, like, speak up. Ultimately, it's going to be my decision, because it stops with me, but I want to hear perspectives. Let's talk through these things. If you think I'm dodging things, if you think I'm doing things a different way, let's talk about it. It's better for everybody's mental health too when you do that. But I think if you really are in this together and see yourself as more of a, hey man, we're in this together, attacking this thing, trying to do this thing better than anybody else has ever done it. Unless you're the smartest man in the world, you better take some outside information.
No doubt.
So you mentioned Nick Saban, so that kind of gives me a nice segue to talk about his boss or his former boss, Mr. Bill Belichick, who everyone knows, huge Pats fan.
Detroit boy, man. That's it. Pats.
So, but in all seriousness, so if tying leadership in, so one of the cool things about the Pats and their quality, like they have the most team captains on the roster. They have the most college graduates on the roster. So when you're building your roster at Maryland, what are you looking to do in terms of like bringing in the right guys and the right leaders and educating them, or are you bringing in a young kid and then teaching him the Maryland way, so to speak? What if you could talk.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's something where you try to identify in the recruiting process as best you can. And this thing's not a perfect science. I mean, the reality is if it was a perfect science, you'd never have guys that wanted to leave. You would never have – everybody would hit 300 and pitch at a 1 ERA. But the reality is recruiting's hard, and I think you don't fully know until you get those young men on your campus every day. Like, I have people all the time, hey, can he stay at shortstop for you? I was like, I don't know. I'll tell you at the end of the fall when I hit him 800 fungos, and I'll be able to tell you if he can. Like, I think just until you can have ideas, but you don't 100% know. But it's our job, especially as – recruiting keeps happening younger and younger. And I know it's the people are trying to slow it down, but as of yet, I mean, most of my conversations I'm having on a daily basis are with freshman and sophomore kids, and so when you're especially recruiting them that young, you don't know. I have friends all the time, and they're like, how in the world do you know if a 14-year-old's even going to be good? And I'm like, you don't. Like, you hope, but you don't. Like, you look for kind of a set of tools, and then you look for the makeup. But I'll tell you, like, number one, I had Sean McCann, he's a video guy at University of Tennessee. He recruited me out of high school and is an absolute hysterical dude of all dudes. And when I told him when I got into coaching, he's like, Rob, and I'm hungry. I'm like, any information, give it to me. He's like, Rob, you want to be a good hitting coach? It's like, yeah. He goes, recruit really good hitters. I was like, oh, okay, thanks. So when you get Brandon Lau come through your program, you're going to spend 3 years with him. Try not to mess him up until he gets to the big leagues and he's an all-star. When you get Nick Dunn in the program, he's going to roll in and hit 300. That's what he's going to do. Like, that's just who he's been. That's who he always is. And he can do it. When you recruit Mike Schwarn, you sit back and you say, go win every game that you ever pitch. Good job. Go get him. But I think number one, I think for people that are like, it's all about makeup. Well, okay. But if you want to win at the level we're talking about, talent does matter. Talent 100% matters. So you got to find the right guys that have the ability. But number two, we try to dive into a lot of stuff and try to figure out the kid. I believe the only thing, I think when you're in recruiting stuff, the one thing I've always believed, we don't have all the bells and whistles at Maryland. You guys have been down there. Beautiful campus, great education. Our stadium, I saw a picture about the first perfect game in college baseball history thrown in 1956, and the only thing about our field that's changed since then is the turf. Like, the grandstands are the same since 1956. Oh, so wow. We're not sitting here with a beautiful new stadium and this and that. So we have to look for, like, how can we separate ourselves? How can we do that? We believe it's really on making sure we get the right people in there. And a thing that is one of my favorite books I've ever read, it's called It Starts With Why. It's by a guy named Simon Sinek. And he talks in his thing about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So our whole premise when we're recruiting kids is like, we want to find kids that believe what we believe, because the more you do that, the easier it is to coach. And I think, for instance, if you're the coach that is obsessed with the mechanics of hitting and pitching, and you recruit a kid that doesn't care at all about mechanics but just cares about competing, you're probably not going to advance too far together because you guys don't believe the same thing. But I think if you're on the same page, regardless of which end of the spectrum it is, you hop on Twitter and it's got to be one or the other, or everybody hates each other. But the reality is, like, I think both matter, and I think both are important. But I do think if you can get the right kid, if you can get the guy that likes being coached by you, that wants to be coached by you, that has an inner drive to get better. I had a conversation with two of our players this morning, two of our young guys, unsolicited by me and my staff, that reached out to Coach Pappy and I to get on a Zoom call because they wanted to learn a little bit more about, man, this is what we think we can do here. Like, how can we take the next step in leadership? How can we take the next step from our team? Like, how do we do this? An unsolicited thing. You get a couple guys like that, what we call them is force multipliers. They're guys that are going to take your message and just spread it through the whole group. If you can get some guys like that and blend that with some talent, you have a chance to be really, really good. But the reality is I think if you're going to be the college baseball coach that has the same question with every freshman kid every Monday night of, hey, Johnny, how did school go? How did this go? Hey, what did you do here? What did you do there? Okay, Johnny, talk to you next week at 7. Like, how are you going to learn that? Like, you're just a used car salesman trying to get a quick yes out of a kid. Our conversations are longer, so it's more time from our families, but we try to give guys homework. We try to have them dive in and say, hey, watch this video. It's going to take 5 minutes of your time. When we hop on the call next week, let's chat about it. And it's amazing if you'll just shut your mouth and listen to a 15-year-old kid talk. They will tell you who deserves to be offered at 15 and who you need to wait a little time with. And I think just because you have that young kid that doesn't have it all together yet, doesn't mean he's not going to be good, doesn't mean he's not going to end up at your school. But for us, we just kind of say, you know what, like, we understand that we got to get the right people in here if we want to do what we want to do here. And so you got to recruit talent, and I think you got to recruit kids that believe deep down in your soul what you believe. And if you can do that, it becomes a lot of fun to come to work every day, and you got a chance to win a lot of games.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's a great answer. Definitely great answer.
And you talk about, you said a little bit ago about surrounding yourself with the right people, and everybody, it's kind of like that herd mentality, right? If these 5 people are believe, you're only as good as, the average of the 5 people around you. So if you have 30 kids around you that are on the same page, you're all pulling the same rope, to an extent. I of course, I run into all these different coaches on the recruiting trail, and I'm at Diamond Nation as much as anybody, I'm sure. And you get to watching games, and games take a while, so you just end up BSing for a little bit. And one thing that I learned from my old coach at Monmouth, Dean Niehalt, is, and something that I never thought about, and it's kind of obvious, is you can learn a lot about a kid based on their transcripts, based on their grades, obviously, but also on their attendance. Are they late to school? Okay. Are they, do they go to school? There are a lot of absences there, right? Because that can tell you a lot about, are they detail oriented? Do they care about the little things, right? If you got a kid rolling in, he's, 20 minutes late to first period every day, that tells you a lot about, the kid's priorities, where they're at. Does he really care? So regardless of how talented the kid is, could be a little bit of a downside to that, a little bit of immaturity.
No doubt. I think you have to pay. I don't think being a 4.0 student means you're going to be a stud baseball player, and I don't think being a 2.5 student means you're going to stink at baseball. But what I do believe, and I tell every kid this, and I tell their parents this, if you're a 2.5 student, be a 2.5 student. If you're a 3.8 student, that's what you can do, be a 3.8 student. Because the reality, nothing drives you more nuts as a coach than the kid that has the ability to be a 3.8 but's willing to be a 2.7. That kid generally is also going to underachieve on the baseball field. Our players hate it because I say it all the time, but I do believe that the way you do anything is the way you do everything. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're willing to cut corners in class, and especially just going to class, like if I can't get you to go to class in high school where mom and dad are waking you up in the morning to go to school, like, the reality is when you get to my place next year and school's harder, like, I'm not calling you every morning at 5 o'clock to get you out of bed. Like, that's the reality. So I do think, and that was part of the conversation I had with 2 of my players this morning. Like, the number one thing I kind of got to is people that are successful, people that become elite, they just care more. Like, and that sounds so basic, but they care about stuff that other people don't care about. They care about their appearance. They care about the way they treat people. They care about their interactions with people. They care about going to class, and they take pride in the fact that they're going to win there too. Doesn't mean they're all great, but they work at it and they try to maximize that. And that's really our job as a coach. Our job as a coach, especially here, man, like, I'm not going to probably have a team that has 7 first rounders on it in 1 year. Probably not going to happen. But for me, it's all about, can we get our guys to maximize their ability? Can they be the best version of who they can be on the field, in the classroom, in anything they do? Because the reality is, even the guys at the best of the best high-ranked schools in the country, whatever you want to talk about, a majority of them are going to be simply normal. Like, I'm going to go to work from 9 to 5. I'm going to come home. I've got 3 kids. I'm married. And what really matters is, if you're going to cut corners on all that stuff when you're 18, what's going to change when you have a kid? Like, and really what this is about, that this world doesn't need more college baseball players. It doesn't need more pro baseball players. I love this sport. It's kind of the vehicle that allows me to do what I love doing. But the reality of what this world really desperately needs is better fathers and better husbands, people that treat their wife the way they should be treated, people that raise their kids in a way that they should be raised and lead their family well. Like, you look at all the craziness that's going around in our world today, a lot of it can point back to dads not being dads.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that's where that stuff really matters, where you're talking about, like, I believe me, 4.0s are a lot more fun for me to try to get into school, but it's more about just, do you care? Like, do you care to show up? Is the things that are small that maybe other people don't think about, are they important enough to you? And if they are, that guy's got more of a chance to maximize his potential in the long run.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. Yeah, it's just the little things, right? The little things you do well, then you do everything well. I like that a lot. It's great.
So you had mentioned about kind of spreading your message or having your players, spread your message. And I know one of the big philosophy you had was the pack offense. And I would love to kind of dive into that a little bit, because I think, like, in any team setting, I think you can get kids to rally around something, and it could be almost anything. I think it's going to bring your team together and kind of give them a goal with inside, more than just winning baseball games, and kind of that whole phrase of, it's not result based, but obviously, trust the process, work on the process. So, I mean, if you could dive into that a little bit, I think our listeners would love to hear that.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, and I alluded to Nick Saban earlier, Nick Saban earlier, and that's some of his big things. And I talked about how he was he's an introvert. Talking in front of people, commanding that is not his biggest skill set. But he knew, if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to lead people, if I'm going to hold this position, I've got to get good at it. And he did. I think the biggest thing in the pack, and I'll get into what that is just clarity in your situation. Clarity in your communication is the biggest thing, in my opinion, to being a good leader. Is you have to be clear. You reference Bill Belichick. He's got one sign hanging in their team house. You know what that one sign says, Steve?
I don't know. Maybe.
Putting you on the spot, maybe.
Put me on the spot.
One sign, and it says, do your job.
Do your job, yeah.
Do your job. That's it. Like, that's the sign in the clubhouse. He doesn't have 15 motivational things. It's not every wall's got a different thing. Do your job. It's clear. It's concise. They know what's expected of them. I firmly believe that kids crave an identity. I see that because I needed that in college. I was the player that was a pretty good college player that didn't believe in himself, that didn't understand. I'd had 3 kind of rocky years. And I had a guy come in my senior year. His name's Andy Sawyers. He's now the head coach at Southeast Missouri State down in Missouri. And the guy not only changed the trajectory of my baseball career, but the guy changed the trajectory of my entire life. Like, I was soured on baseball. I was like, man, I got one more year, whatever. We were supposed to be awesome this year, and we were 500. We weren't very good. Sawyers came in, and it was the first time that somebody gave us sincere direction. And what it is he brought with him from Texas A&M. He was the volunteer assistant at Texas A&M, and it was called the PAC. And, Matt Deggs is the originator of it. Matt Deggs has one of the most phenomenal stories you'll ever meet. He's an unbelievable human. His path in baseball and in life has been sobering. It's been hard. It's had some bumps, but it's a remarkable story. He's now the head coach at Louisiana Lafayette down in Louisiana. But, Deggs was sitting around, and he's a creative genius. Like, the guy, I'm telling you, Deggs' biggest strength, and this is why communicating matters. Deggs' biggest strength is he could convince you that the sky is purple, and not only convince you that it's purple, but if you try to tell me it was blue, that I would beat the crap out of you for not agreeing with me. Like, that's the reality. That's who Deggs is. It's incredible. Like, his ability to cast vision and to say, this is who we are, this is what we're going to be, is unbelievable. So he's sitting around, and he's at Texas A&M, I believe it was 2007, 2008. And he literally saw a wolf documentary late at night one night and started kind of coming up with this thing. The juices start flowing, and the PAC was born that day. And the PAC started at A&M with them. Sawyers brought it with him to Kansas State. I was a senior on that team. I brought it to Maryland. I know Mike Clement, who's over at Ole Miss, PAC type guy, and there's a lot of people that do it with some different names, but the whole premise of the PAC is that kids crave an identity and they crave a vision. So that's what we try to do. We try to set the standard of, this is who we are. when I was a hitting coach only, and this is kind of the offensive side of it, we had three pillars in the pack. What those three pillars are, in my opinion, don't matter, but you better believe them. Because when I started, when I was young, my three pillars were Matt Degg's three pillars. And while I think that guy is the man, there were other things maybe that I just took a little bit differently, or that I just found myself caring about more. So to me, I think that's the point of this, of a coaching, is like take these ideas and then make them your own. And so that's what I try to do with the pack. And the premise of it is it divides our hitters up. We had three categories. We have we call them the burners, the bombers, and the ball players. Those were our three categories that we had. And I think when you look at that, you have every player is different. I think for us to coach every player the same way, especially in college, and I'll get blown up by somebody that tells me I'm telling a 5'2" kid he can't hit home runs or something, and I'm not saying that. But the reality is, if you fly and your money is made getting on bases, find ways to do it. Like on-base percentage is king for that guy. Find a way to get on base, because when you're on base, we score runs. When we score runs, we win games. So the way we train those guys centers around that. They've got to be great with the short game. I don't like sack bunting a lot, but they have to be great with the drag bunt. They have to be great at not moving their feet in the batter's box. They have to be great at owning the strike zone. They have to have low punch-out numbers. I don't care. They can drive the baseball all they want, but they have to be in a situation where their on-base percentage is 400 or better. Because when those guys are on base, they create havoc and they can do some things. The second piece to that, we had the bombers, and the bombers are exactly what they sound like. They're professional RBI collectors. That's the rule. Like, go collect RBIs, go drive the baseball. I want them to be the ones that are a little bit more feared in the batter's box when they're coming up. And then the ball player is probably like 80% of us. It's what I was. It's the guy that's not the strongest. He's not the fastest, doesn't have the most power. Maybe it's a shortstop that can really defend, that's hitting 7, 8, 9 for you. The reality is, if the ball player sells out into quality at bats, running a good plan off, being a master of execution in whatever that situation is, I think that guy has a chance to be really successful in your offense. Because the reality is, when you're facing a team, everybody's got somebody hitting probably 2, 3, 4 that are good. Every single team does. The really good teams, it's like 2, 3, 4, 5. And so 6 through 9, for most guys, is not the guys that everybody's petrified of. So if you can make your 6 through 9 guys productive, if you can make them, whether it's they're a threat to leave the yard, whether it's a threat to run, whether it's a threat to execute in those situations, when those guys can be productive, those are your ball players. That's when you have a chance to be dynamite. So everything for me was built around, how are we going to score runs? Because that's really all I care about in hitting. I don't care about batting average. I don't care about homers. I don't care about any of that. I just want to score as many runs as humanly possible every single game. And so what we did by splitting those three things up, what I think it did is it gave our guys an identity. You know, there's a quote by Rudyard Kipling in his book, Law of the Jungle, and it's the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. And that's what this is all about. Those three categories aren't a hierarchy. It's not like, bombers hit homers, even though everybody wants to tell you that's the coolest thing now. Like, bombers hit homers and runners are kind of here and then ball players here. It's not that, man. It's like we all need each other. And the fact is, if the ball players aren't getting their job, the bombers aren't having RBIs to collect when their time comes. So to me, that was kind of the premise of the pack, is it gave everybody an identity, whether you were Maxwell Costas, who's hits balls really hard and does a lot of things really good for us, or whether you're the freshman that's just cracking into the lineup for the first time and you're trying to figure out where you fit. I think it gives everybody an identity of, this is what I've got to be great at. Because the reality is, if the 5'2" burner's trying to judge himself by how many homers he hits, he's going to think he stinks. But the reality is, that's not what we need to be good at. So the pack was kind of born through Deggs, and that's kind of the 30-second premise of it. I mean, we had pillars of it. We had kind of what we stood for. You know, this has kind of stayed with us, but it started like we had 3 pillars in the pack. We have 3 pillars of our program now. But the player that wears number 3 in our program is the guy that best exemplifies those 3 pillars. So for us, it started with Zach Jankarski. He was the guy that did it back in the day. Anthony Papio actually had it before him. It started with Pap, then it went to Jankarski. Randy Bednar wore it this year for us. And, you know, I think it's something that the ideas encompassed in the pack is something that really helped me as I moved on to being a head coach, because you take it and you apply that to the whole thing. Like, what do guys need to be good at? Guys crave structure, they crave organization, and they crave discipline. Whether they think they do or not, they do. And so to me, it's our job to help them understand, what do you need to be good at? Because they're their best coaches. We have so many limitations on hours that we can spend with guys that if they don't understand it and they're just trying to appease you while they're in the cage or they're on the mound, they're not going to get to the level you want them to get at just because you don't have the time. So that's what the whole premise behind that is. It's like, man, we're not alone. And the best example of that we had from the hitting thing was in 2014. We played the NC State team with Carlos Rodon and Trey Turner on it.
Mm-hmm.
Trey Turner's to this day the best college baseball player I ever saw, but Rodon's on the mound. I am completely full of it. I'm in the locker room talking about, like, I literally printed out a picture of a buffalo in wolves like surrounding it, and then I like labeled it Rodon and then our players' names, and I taped it to all the hitters' lockers. And that's all I talked about the whole time. Like, the way you take down the buffalo is not going one-on-one. If you try to beat Carlos Rodon one-on-one, you are going to lose every single time. The way you beat him is one guy grabs one leg, one guy grabs the other, one jumps on his back, and then the other one jumps up and grabs him by the throat and takes him down. That's how wolves hunt. That's how you beat dudes. So that's the premise behind the pack is he might get one of us, he might get two of us, but if we just keep coming and we keep on it, keep battling, keep scratching, keep clawing, it might be a hit by pitch in the fourth, and then a ball in dirt, we get a great read, a ground ball backside, score some sac fly, you're up one. Like, that's the reality. And it doesn't take anything sexy, but that takes a lot of unselfishness, and it takes a lot of belief. We ended up beating Rodon that game 10-1, and we had him out in the fourth inning, not because their coach put buffalo pictures on their locker, but I think the guys bought into it. The guys understand, like, man, if I try to go beat the superstar one-on-one, and that's every Friday night guy. Like, every Friday night guy in our league, every Friday night guy across the country is a dude. There's not a guy pitching there that stinks. And if you're going to try to go one-on-one against him on Friday, and it's like, man, I'm going to get mine, it's going to be really hard to take that guy down. But we've done some pretty good things over the years as far as handling some of those bigger and better arms, and I think a lot of that's attributed to the pack and guys understanding who they are and what's expected out of them.
So you mentioned those three guys offensively, and I think that's awesome. I actually wrote that down in my notebook. That's great. Undoubtedly, if you're recruiting 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and you have 18 through 21-year-olds on your team, there are going to be guys that in high school were bombers, right? Mm-hmm. But now at a college level, they're a shortstop. Maybe they're more of a ball player. Maybe they're more of a burner. They're not necessarily a bomber. What's the coaching behind having that guy buy in? Is it more of just, having the culture set already and the older guys just stepping up saying, hey, like, this is your job. This is how we're going to be successful. Let's go. Or is it it's going to take a little bit, but what's the process there? Do you kind of bring a guy in and talk to him? Like, how do you do that?
Well, that's a great question. Cause I think inevitably, if I put those three on the table, every single guy's gonna be like, yeah, I want to be a bomber. That's what I want to do. I want to be that. I'm going to be that. I'm going to be that guy. But I think just watch the Major League Baseball. You can pick them out. Like, there's ball players getting paid millions and millions of dollars. Like, I'll be a ball player if you're going to pay me like that. I'm in. But I think a lot of it is the culture, is the idea. Like, we spend a ton of time on this. Like, we do what we call pack training, and pack training has absolutely nothing to do with baseball. And it's changed over the years. It used to be a little more intense, which, again, when you're the assistant coach, you're like, the head coach will get in trouble. I don't care. Like, now it's like on me. I'm like, okay, stop. It's too much.
I'm too familiar with that.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah. So, but basically it's just stuff to where I think the more you put guys in groups working together to solve problems, working together to get through some adversity together, working together to do stuff. And we did that every Friday. And you can talk to some of my former players. You should get Coach Papio sometimes. There was a pack training we did. We went to our first super regional in the history of the school in 2014, went to South Carolina, advanced to the super at Virginia. And I was bound and determined to make sure those guys understood that next year, day one, like, you haven't done anything yet. Like, this team hasn't done anything yet. And it was like the most legendary. It was like this log run that I thought was only like half a mile and ended up being like 3 miles. It was like this mess of a situation. It was really bad. But we do a lot of stuff like that. And I think obviously it's tamed down a little bit now. But But I think stuff like that, where you're putting guys in situations where they're uncomfortable, particularly young guys coming in, and this game humbles you. Like, and I think the best players, you talk in the recruiting process to them about that too. Like, hey, I know you're a guy that's hitting like a lot of homers and this and that. Like, believe me, I'm never going to tell a guy to stop hitting homers. That's runs right there, and I like those. But the reality is, like, I've had this conversation 1,000 times with guys. You can hit 220 and hit 8 home runs, and maybe you feel cool about that because you hit 8 home runs. Our team is going to be better. We're going to win more games. You're going to be the best version of who you can be if you hit 320 with 4, because you're going to be on base. You're not going to swing and miss as much. You're not going to hit as many of the 280-foot fly balls that everybody's screaming to get out of the yard, that every coach in America knows is not going over the fence. Like, you're just going to be more consistent that way. And I think when you recruit kids and you're real with them, I think that's what you just have to be. You have to be real. Like, and I've told guys that, like, hey, like, I'm not going to ever tell you to stop. I mean, I want homers. I want doubles. I love those. And I will never coach that out of a guy. But the reality is, like, we need this out of you. We had a conversation with Tyler Blome a couple years ago, one of our pitchers who was a senior this year. Tyler, his sophomore year, was the reigning Big Ten pitcher of the year, had struck everybody out, or he was the Big 12 freshman of the year, I'm sorry. Had struck everybody out his freshman year, but he threw a ton of pitches. And so his innings total was not high, but he had a ton of strikeouts. He had all the accolades. Our conversation with him was, Tyler, I like striking guys out too, but for our team, we are thin on pitching this year, and we need more innings out of you. I need you to be more efficient with your pitch count. It's a little bit the same thing, like this team. And Tyler's response was like, got it, understand it, good. And guys, if you bring the right guys in and you make sure that's right on the front end, you can have those honest conversations with them, because ultimately it's for their good. Because if you're bringing in kids that don't want to win, you're bringing in the wrong kids anyway. So if you're telling them, like, hey, here's the recipe, here's how we do it, we've done it before, here's what it looks like, this is what we need out of you to be successful, then I think they can take it and run with it. And the reality is, maybe they get in the weight room after their freshman year and put on 20 pounds, and you're like, oh, all right, maybe his role's kind of changed a little bit. I don't think anything's set in stone, but I do think what it does, it just gives kids direction, and it gives them some structure. And I think every kid craves an identity, and the more we can feed that and be clear with, this is what our mission is, this is who you are, and this is how you fit into this pack. I think when you do that, man, kids thrive under that. They love it. They have fun doing it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
One of the cool things that I liked about the pack also was, I thought it really gave the idea of what team offense should be in baseball, which I think, a lot of high school players don't understand it, and you hear the term, baseball is an individual game disguising as a team sport, which is something to agree. Or to some, I agree with. But what I think the pack does is, obviously, you said it gives identity, but every other sport you see has, team offense. You have an offense, whether it's a triangle offense, whether it's a run and shoot or run and gun in football, whatever it may be. Baseball never really had that. So kids kind of come in, you start giving identity, and they're wrapped up, and they have a plan now to go take down a Carlos Rondon, because you're instilling that as an offense, not just as, okay, you're at bat, and now next guy goes up, now it's his at bat, instead of, no, you're working collectively to score the run and to win the baseball game. And I think that's what attracted me the most to that philosophy.
No doubt. And I think you're 100% right on with that, because I think it does. It gives guys some direction. That's what I say all the time. Like, we talked about putting our staff together, right? The reason Swoper and I work so good together is he loves the mechanics of the swing. Like, that dude could sit here and have a biomechanical conversation about the way your body moves, and my eyes would glaze over, and I'd have no idea what he's talking about. And he loves it. He loves it. And I think that's important. My passion is scoring as many runs as humanly possible. Like, Swope, I don't care if they stand on their head, dude. We're going to score 10 today. Like, that's what I want. But the reason him and I work so well together is you get both of those. Because there is a time and a place where, I don't care how hard you're competing, if you're that jacked up mechanically, movement-wise, there's going to have to be some adjustments. We had a freshman come in this year, one of our highly touted guys, Bobby Zamarslight, came in and had a tough freshman fall. Like, was just not the same guy early, and was tough. And like, we had days where he would just spend with Swoper. Like, hey, his group would come out and hit on the field, and it's like, hey, you're inside with him. Like, break it down. Bobby Z was hitting in our 4-hole the last game of the year. Like, so for me to sit here and tell you, mechanics don't matter, just get guys to compete. No, they do, because what Bobby was doing in September would not have allowed him to do what he was doing in March. So that stuff does matter. But the other side matters too. And I think for some, we just live in this world of extremes in everything, in religion, in politics, in baseball. And it's like, if you think that mechanics matter, then that means that competing doesn't matter at all. And it's like, and it's wrong. Like, that's just the wrong philosophy. And that's why I think Swoper and I work good together, because we're able to kind of mesh that. Like, he loves that stuff and it matters. I love trying to figure out ways to score runs, to instill offense, to put guys kind of in the jungle and make them learn how to compete. Like, those are the things I love doing. And so to me, that's what I say. He's like the quarterback's coach and I'm the offensive coordinator. Like, that's the way we meld together. Neither one's more important than the other. They both matter and they both have their roles. But it's just, how does it work? And I think that's exactly what the pack gives you, is it gives you that offensive identity to where, because the reality is, if you don't have that and you're facing a Friday night dude and it's like, okay, 1-on-1, I got to get mine. Like, you don't have trust in the guy in front of you. You don't have trust in the guy behind you, and it's not going to work out. Randy Bednar, who, again, is wearing 3 for us this year, the reason I called him all the time, the guys were making fun of me by the end of the short season that we had this year, but he was my professional RBI collector. There was a runner on third base, less than 2 outs. That guy was going to hit a ground ball to shortstop and score a run. First pitch, and he wasn't going to try to get big. Too many guys get the fastball out of the plate in that position, and they take a hack to hit it 800 feet, and they foul it off. And against the Friday night guy, when you miss that, you're done. Like, you're not getting another one. Randy was so professional, but that tells you that he's bought into what his role is and that it's about the team and not him. Because if it's about him, this is draft year. It's a junior. How many guys are like, oh my gosh, I got to hit 50 home runs this year. I've got to hit 800. I've got to do this. And if I don't, I'm not going to get drafted. And those guys are the worst to ever coach. When you sell out to the team and you sell out to your boys, that's when it gets fun. And to me, that's what the pack does for you, is exactly what you're talking about, is instilling some identity into an offense in a sport that's a lot of one-on-one altercations.
Mm-hmm. So you keep talking about the pack. It's great. Are there any other things during the year? I mean, ultimately, the pack mentality offensively creates that camaraderie among your team, right? Are there any other things that you do that kind of instill even more camaraderie within your team to bring out the competitiveness of your guys?
Yeah, we compete every single day. I think that's always going to be who I am. You know, one of the first books I read as a coach was Pete Carroll's book, Win Forever. And he talks about, in his book, when he's going through this, he talks about, you know, he was a failed NFL head coach. He hadn't been good. Like, he was let go. And when he got hired at USC, it was like, what the world are we doing here? This is like a storied program. We're bringing in a guy that's been fired and has failed. But he talks about how he never sat down and wrote out, this is what I care about. This is like John Wooden had his pyramid for success. These are my principles that I care about, and this is how my program's going to be built. That book is what started that 50-page packet that I gave to Kevin Anderson in that office in 2017, because it was like, let's put pen to paper on what matters to you. And the one thing that penetrates Pete Carroll's culture is the same thing that penetrates mine, and that's competing. Like, we will never, ever, ever have one single day at our program where there's not some kind of competition. I was talking to one of our kids this morning. I was talking to one of our guys, and he was telling me, he's like, you know, I love competitions. I said, why? Just trying to hear what he was going to say. And he was like, you know, I get in there and I'm thinking about hitting and I'm thinking about my mechanics. And I'm thinking about stuff, which is good because it's stuff I need to work on. But he's like, when I get out there, man, like, I don't care what the competition is. I want to win it. And that's what separates this kid. That's the reason he's good. And I've said this, he's got a lot of growth in a lot of areas. But the one thing that kid had is in spades is competitiveness. And so that's at the center of everything we do. We compete in the classroom for stuff. We compete. We never go through a day of hitting where we don't compete. We have a thing, and our guys hate it. We call it the two-headed monster. And the two-headed monster is two hack attack pitching machines. One's a fastball and one's a breaking ball. We either do them side by side or we take the mini hack and put it down and then the other one on top. And Coach Pappy and I will go out there and both hold a ball up and count to 3, and we both go down, but only one of us puts the ball in. And one is, and I'm talking we're close. Like, we measure this out, and it's like 95 with a hammer. And not only do we get out there, there is no confidence building on those days. Like, I'm trying to tear them apart, and we talk trash to them when they do. And I think the reason we do it is I think it's the whole idea behind what I believe with competing is the fact that you have to spend time in the jungle. I could get on a whole nother talk about kind of it's a Trevor Reagan thing from this podcast called The Learner's Lab, which I would recommend listening to if you guys never checked it out. It's phenomenal. But it's like the zoo tiger and the jungle tiger. And it's like the zoo tiger, everything's handed to him. It's very easy. Like, his life is good. His meals are good. He's comfortable in the zoo. But if you throw that dude in the wild, he is going to get eaten alive because he's never had to figure that stuff out for himself. He's never had to figure out how to survive. The jungle tiger, his life's hard. That guy's out there. He's having to hunt his own food. It's hot. He doesn't know when he's eating, and he's having to scratch and claw for everything he gets. So him in the wild, he's used to it. So when you throw them out there, it's very obvious that the jungle tiger has got a better chance of survival. It's the same thing with players. Like, if you never put them in an environment where the bullets are flying and it's hard and it's crazy, how in the world do we expect them to go be successful? It's like the hitting coach is like, he can't take his BP into a game. Like, he's great at hitting at 5 o'clock. Yeah, because he's hit 55 mile an hour BP every day for the last 7 years. Yeah. Like, no wonder when he's facing 96 with a hammer that his mechanic's a little different because he's not comfortable. He's panicking and the game's getting fast for him. So it's amazing. You put them in those situations where the bullets are flying, whether that's on team defense, whether that's in our bullpens, whether that's, with our hitters. And you get them in that situation where they're competing like crazy, which is fun. Like, and if you've recruited the right guys, it's fun. But number 2, I just think it prepares them more for the game. Like, you can ask our guy, we do things in practice that are way harder than things they do in the game, and it doesn't always look pretty. But that's the reality. Is as a coach, is it our job to make practice look pretty, or is it our guys to make them prepared for game day? And if you're worried about it looking pretty, then you got to check your ego at the door because you're worried about the wrong stuff. Because if they're really good at it and it's beautiful, you've either got the best team that's ever been created or you're not challenging them enough. So when we do stuff like that, it's unbelievable how you see that stuff form, how you see freshmen and seniors like on the same end of the rope pulling, and you start seeing that. I think the quickest way, because that's what we have to do, we get these guys in August and we get them for a couple months. They go home for Christmas. They come back for 3 weeks and our season starts. Mm-hmm. So you have them for such a short period of time that, to me, one of the best ways to create like unity and tightness and camaraderie is to forge them in the fire together. And it's amazing when you put them out there and you're doing one of these tough pack trainings, or you're doing something that's difficult. You're doing something that they don't know if they can do. And all of a sudden, again, if you have the right kids, you got the senior like pulling the freshman along. And all of a sudden there's a relationship that starts to get built there. And there's something that comes with that. You have the freshman that just got his absolute tail kicked. And you go up to the locker room after and the senior's got his arm around him being like, dude, I remember that. I was there. Like, I've been there. We're going to get through this. You're good. And that stuff happens. Again, number one, if you have the right kids. But that stuff doesn't happen if everything's easy, if everything's good. So I think we kind of are in this world where, shoot, I fight it as a parent. I've got a 3.5-year-old dressed in a Batman costume right now, riding a scooter around our living room as I'm looking in there. And as a parent, I want him to like be safe and I want him to be good at stuff. But the reality is, like, the only way that happens is if I let him struggle, if I let him fail. Like, we're in such a day and age where it's like, let's mow down any adversity in front of our young men's way because I don't want them to hurt. But the reality is, like, how in the world are they supposed to survive when the bullets start flying if they've never felt it? Like, there's parents right now getting laid off for jobs and that don't know how they're going to provide. And it's a hard time for a lot of people around the world right now. But I'm not saying we can prepare kids for this, but if you're going to cut down every obstacle in their way, it's really hard for those guys to get that. So I think that's what we have to do. I think there's obviously a limit. Like, there's a limit in pushing guys and abusing players, clearly. But I think we have to create scenarios and then step back and say, go get them. You guys are in this together. There's 35 of you, and here's the mission. Here's the time. Here's what you got to accomplish. Go. If you get it, great. If not, let's run it back again. And you start doing that, I think you get camaraderie to meld so much faster than if we went out and took BP and let's hit some ground balls and do that. I think when you forge it in the fire a little bit, there's some relationships that are built that those kids don't ever forget. I remember days running in at Kansas State and literally wanting to like pass out as a freshman, having guys pull me along, like, come on, you're good. I still talk to those guys to this day, not because they were good baseball players, but because, man, when I was struggling, they were picking me up. And I think that's our job as coaches, is to figure out how do we create those moments for those guys to grow and kind of meld together as a unit.
When I played at Monmouth, we had something called Heart of the Hawk.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
familiar with Heart of the Hawk.
It was brought I think it was brought from Jimmy Bellinger, who went on to coach at Maryland with you. And he brought it from Louisville, and I guess it's the Omaha Challenge with you guys.
Yeah.
Can you touch on that a little bit, and can you define what the Omaha Challenge really is? And as a coach, and as a leader of these kids, what you are looking for ultimately, right? You're looking for these kids to compete, obviously, but it's at the end of the fall usually, or however you do it, right? What are you looking for ultimately as the leader of this team?
Yeah. We called it the Iron Turf. We did a lot of the stuff because Jimmy came straight from Mama. So we were doing like the regional runs. We were doing a lot of the stuff you guys were doing over there. So I'm sure you remember all those fun ones. I think one thing about me is when other people do stuff, even if it's a good idea, I just don't want to do it. Like, I'm all about like the Iron Turf, and then I see 78 Omaha challenges going on. It's like, forget that. I don't want to do that anymore. Everybody else is doing that. And that's kind of just the way my mind works. But we've done variations. We've done a lot of different things. We've done multi-day things. We've done week-long things. We space them out through the entire semester. And I don't think there's any one way. But to me, the big thing that I'm looking for in that is just, number one, like, who's going to quit? Like, when it gets a little bit hard, who's going to quit? Number two is, when it's getting a little bit hard, who's the one looking to help the people around them, and who's the one just looking to survive? Because you start to learn really, really quickly who your kind of influences, who your force multipliers is the word I looked for earlier. Like, who's the guy when they're getting uncomfortable that their first instinct is to help the people around them? And I wish I could say when I was 18 that was me. It wasn't. Like, I was like, how do I not throw up till I get over to the trash can? But the reality, the guys that are in the situation to where they're legitimately like looking around for helping others, you're starting to see something in that situation. But for me, the biggest thing I look for, obviously I want the guys to want to win, but I just want to see the guys push themselves, because the reality is there's a ton of, you did those, like, you've seen them. Like, if you're a 255-pound pitcher, you're probably not going to be elite at the regional run, which is like touching every 5 yards on the football field. Like, it's probably not going to be your cup of tea right there. But there's a difference in just being satisfied, saying, yep, I'm just not good at this one, whatever, and in like attacking it and giving it every ounce of what you have. And maybe you finish dead last. But I complimented a kid one time that finished dead last because I thought he was like going to keel over and pass out about halfway through it, and he finished. And this was early on. I'm like, oh, thank goodness, we're okay, we're safe, everybody's good. But my point being, like, I look way more – obviously you want the guys to win. Papio won every one of those he ever did. But you want guys to win. But I want guys that just kind of have that push, that no matter what it is, like, you throw them in a pool and they're terrible swimmers, that they're going to doggy paddle like you've never seen trying to get to the other end of it. If you're – whatever it is, I just want to see effort. And more importantly, what I like is I like looking for the guy that when things get hard, that their eyes go up and they're looking around for other people versus – down, talking about how tired they are, how bad this is, how bad this stinks. Like, those guys are usually, not that they're bad, not that that has any bearing on them throwing or hitting a baseball, but they're not going to be the guys that are going to be the force multipliers through the team. And to me, those things show that. And I think there's so many pros and cons to those, and I think it's figuring out for you how is the best way to get it. We actually didn't do one this year because we did pack training throughout the year. And so for me, it's like, I want to see this weekly. Like, I want to see a once a week thing. I thought it was a little bit safer for our bodies doing it once a week versus doing 12 events in 4 days. But I also just wanted, I didn't want to wait until December to see kind of how I felt about certain guys. Like, I wanted to see some of that. And you see growth. You coach those guys, the guys that want to be coached, the guys that want to grow in that usually do. So those are the main things I'm looking for when we do, whether it's pack training, Iron Turk, Omaha Challenge, whatever anybody calls it. That's kind of what I'm looking for, at least.
Cool. Good deal.
Yeah.
We want to be respectful of your time. I mean, is there anything else you want to hit on? I mean, you're just throwing knowledge left and right. So.
Talk about the importance of Ric Flair to your program.
Oh, Ric Flair. I grew up watching like Rey Mysterio, Ric Flair. Like, those guys were my dudes. Bill Goldberg and spearing people. Like, I grew up in the days of like ordering WWE pay-per-view events so I could watch at home. Like, that was my thing. And like, you have the pack, right? Like, where we just got done talking about the pack and all that stuff. At the bottom of the first inning for every single home game we have, I don't know if you guys are wrestling fans, but you had the NWO Wolfpack with like Kevin Nash and those guys. Like, that song comes on as soon as we get the third out in the top of the first inning and start rolling. So, yeah, like, it was a funny thing. I don't even know how it started. That first summer, we were out of our minds. Moose was pent up for like 8 weeks because he had to – he was waiting to be hired and all this. So he was like unleashed on the baseball world that summer. I mean, we went through a period. We had like 9 visits in 7 days at one point. It was like absurd. And I think we didn't sleep, I don't think. And yeah, I don't know. Somehow Ric Flair was born, and we had a Ric Flair night at the park one night. Like, it got wild. So yeah, Ric Flair somehow permeated our program, which was fun to see. The 30 for 30 documentary came out, and so I'm like jacked up to watch it. I got done with the documentary. I was like, man, we're talking about character and leadership and developing men, and I don't know if I can keep tweeting out Ric Flair left and right, or if I need to change that. Yeah. But yeah, so no, the last thing, what I'll leave, and like my favorite thing, I just got done reading a book. It's maybe the favorite book that I've read in a really long time. It's called It Takes What It Takes by a guy named Trevor Moawad, and he worked with Alabama football. He works with Russell Wilson individually. That phrase got popular through a Nick Saban press conference, and this is all kind of Trevor's words coming through Saban. But what he said is, like, for kids that want to be great, the biggest thing they have is they have this illusion of choice. Like, they think they have all these choices, but the reality is, if you want to be elite at whatever it is that you do, you really don't have many choices, because it takes what it takes, right? Like, if you want to be elite, you're not going to be dehydrated because of decisions you make the night before. If you want to be elite, you're not going to eat McDonald's instead of taking time to get the right meal and fuel your body the right way. If you want to be elite, you're not going to cut reps in the weight room. And that's just the whole idea behind this, is like, being elite is not some super secret club that nobody knows the ingredients to. It's just hard, because human nature is like, man, that's hard. Like, nobody's going to know if I do 7 instead of 8. Like, nobody's going to know that. But the game knows. I firmly believe that the game pays you back. And the reality is, that's one of my biggest beliefs. And it's something that I've been chewing on a ton lately. It's just that whole idea of, like, it takes what it takes. And don't tell me you want to be a big leaguer when I see you carrying McDonald's into the yard every day. Like, you don't. Like, and it's okay. And I'll tell them that. Like, hey, man, it's not a big deal. Like, you don't care about being good. You're comfortable. You're fine. Like, yeah, good. No worries. You're good. And that hacks them off. They don't like that. But that's the reality, is I don't think it's some huge secret. I would encourage coaches. It's unbelievable. Like, that read for coaches is really good. It's a great read for players. It's a really quick book, but it's one of the like, I've got a handful of books that are like my go-tos, and that thing hops straight to the top. Like, it's a really good one. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, one of the pillars of our program is having a growth mindset. It's ownership, toughness, and a growth mindset. And to me, it's like wanting to grow, wanting to learn, wanting to get into this. The only way you really learn is who you surround yourself with. TJ, you said it earlier. It's one of the lines I use all the time. You're the sum of the 5 people, or you're the average of the 5 people you hang around most. And so I tell kids, if you're the smartest guy in your group, go find 5 new friends. If you're the fastest, go find 5 new friends, like, because you're getting dragged down, I promise. So I think it's who you're around. I think it's what you watch. And I don't think there's anything wrong with watching Netflix and Hulu and these. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing video games. I don't. If you play them for 12 hours a day, I think that's probably an issue. But in the time and space, I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. I think your mind needs time to turn off. But what are you watching? Who are you surrounding yourself by? And what are you reading? Like, and I know some guys aren't big readers. Download audiobooks. They're all around all the time. Get mom and dad to get you an audible.com subscription and start listening to some of those. And man, like, those are some of the things that have challenged me the most. And guys that are scared to be challenged on what they believe are just very insecure. So I would challenge people, like, go learn something, go figure something out, go talk to people. Like, I think having mentors is so important. I have guys I lean on all the time. Andy Sawyers will be a lifelong friend. I'm not where I am. I'm not the man I am today. I'm not who I am without him. Matt Deggs is a guy, if I ever have an issue, I call. John Sheff, if I ever have an issue, like, that guy I would trust with my family. I mean, that guy is a guy of all guys. And I think it's important, like, go find somebody, whether if you're a player, go find somebody that's doing what you want to be and say, how do I do this? What do you do? How have you got here? If you're a coach that says, like, man, I look up to that guy, I want to be like that, go talk. Like, man, what do you do? Like, what is your routines? What does it look like? Because people don't get to places by accident. And so to me, that's my big thing. Never stop learning. My wife laughs at me all the time because she told me, she's like, hey, you need to start reading more before bed. It'll help you go to sleep a little better. I start reading. I'm up to like 3 a.m. And she's like, what are you reading? I was like, it's this new book I got. And she's like, what is it? And I told her, she's like, babe, no leadership books before bed because they suck me in and I can't go to sleep. But yeah, so that's what I'd encourage people. Go check out podcasts. Go find people that are better than you that you want to learn from and be like. Ask questions, learn, grow, read. Those are things that I love doing that have challenged the way I do things and challenged my thought process a lot. And I hope, we talk in 3 more years and I'm telling you how much different I am 3 years from now. That's the hope, but hope we never stop growing and learning, but we're having fun along the way. That's for sure.
That's it. That's great.
All right. Well, good stuff. Well, yeah, we appreciate you coming on because this is going to be huge for our listeners, anyone who wants to check it out. So we definitely appreciate your time. We know you're a busy guy. So, stay safe and hopefully we'll see you on the field soon.
Yeah, hopefully I get to get up to Diamond Nation and see you boys soon because I'm having withdrawals here.
Yeah, I think we're all itching a little bit. So hopefully soon.
No doubt. Well, guys, I appreciate it too, man. You guys do an awesome job. And I've said that I've known both of you for a long time. You guys do a heck of a job with what you do and appreciate what you guys do for the game and for the kids and appreciate you guys a lot.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
All right, catch
guys.
you later.
See you.